about Detroit, I'm talking about the neighborhoods. I'm talking about Deep West, Deep East, Northwest, Southwest. There's experiences that come from those communities that are very important to understanding the experiences of all Detroiters.
There's so many good artists in Detroit. Everybody is not going to become nationally known, but when you go, you just hear really wonderful music.
We've got the beat of the nation here in Detroit because here we have people that work together of all races, of all religions, who in this cosmopolitan area have found a way to solve our common problems. That is the lesson of Detroit.
Welcome back to the Metro on 1019 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham. And the world of fashion is under pressure. Sales have slowed in recent years, and that's because inflation and economic uncertainty have people spending less. It's also because of people's morals. The ugly reality is that the fashion industry has devastated our environment. That, coupled with exploitive working conditions in manufacturing, have buyers reconsidering both what they buy and where they are buying their clothes from. In Detroit this week, many designers and manufacturers will gather for Detroit Fashion United. The local initiative is part of a global movement that promotes sustainable fashion as the solution to environmental and workplace harms. It promotes more organic materials, fair wages, and quality clothing items that last. For the rest of the hour, we're going to explore how sustainable fashion attempts to address the problems and explore Detroit's potential to be the next fashion hub. We also want to hear from you. How have your fashion habits changed? The phone lines are open. You can give us a call, 313-577-1019. That's 313-577-1019, and let us know. Paulina Petkowski is a professor at the College for Creative Studies, a designer, a stylist, and an advocate for sustainable fashion practices, and she joins me now in studio. Paulina, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Of course. So I want to jump right into there and focus on the impacts of traditional fashion manufacturing a little bit. But I want to jump into this. It's 700 gallons to make one cotton shirt. I think about one person needing to drink 8 cups of water a day for over 3.5 years to consume that much water. So when we talk about that process, what is all that water used for?
The water wastage in cotton irrigation and the growing of the actual fibers is a big part of that process. But additionally, it's not just in creating the material, the raw material, it's also in the wash processes. So when you're trying to get that, worn look, whether you're doing that with stone rolling in the machines or stuff like that, it's just used at many different stages of the process.
Oh. And many of the textiles that are produced in the world, they end up in landfills too. And let's talk a little bit about how the entire supply chain, which includes consumers, is contributing to this issue. And once again, I don't want to dump on those who are into the fast fashion but at the same time, how do we keep this out of the landfills, and how do we figure out what is the contributing factors to this issue?
Well, you mentioned it. There are two sides of this coin. There is over consumption, but there's also overproduction. And so a lot of companies, to hit their minimums, to get their price points as low as possible, they have to have high orders of volumes for the fabric yards that they do, or the minimums that the factories overseas will place. So there's basically already an allotted amount of garments or textiles that are already going to be wasted straight out the gate. So people then, they're confronted with all this marketing, all of this, a messaging that says, buy more. All of these trends are happening. And so people get caught up in the fact that they don't think that they can wear the same outfit, multiple times over on, Instagram or something like that. But, the opposite of fast fashion is slow fashion. And that's really the way to turn this boat around, is just
Let's get
buying
into
less.
Slow fashion. Yeah. What is slow fashion, especially for those who don't know? I don't know what that is. So talk to me about slow fashion.
Well, a lot of people know what fast fashion is, right? So, those are garments that are seen on the runway, and then companies like Zara or H&M can quickly go to market, and they have vertical production channels. So that means that they can produce everything within their own chain and get it out to stores immediately. So you're seeing these trends hit stores even before some of the designers on the runway are able to go through their own production means. But in contrast, slow fashion is really about picking the best materials possible, producing them ethically and responsibly, and then making garments that are made to last, as opposed to, be made as cheaply as possible, so that when you wear it a couple times, when you wash it a couple times, it starts to pill, it starts to, get holes or fall apart, and that's what contributes to people wanting to throw it away, and they don't take the time to actually mend their own clothing or fix their own clothing or make their own clothing, which honestly, up until, the 90s was pretty common. I think most people's grandparents or grandmothers would make their own, costumes for Halloween. I mean, the Halloween industry is just another example of throwaway consumer mindset that is really detrimental to the planet.
You speak about just like your grandma making stuff or your aunts or whatever. Like my mom talks about my grandma making her this like crocheted sweater that she loved so much, and she wished she would have kept it, but she didn't keep it. And I just think about those type of things that they could have lasted for a very long time. That handmade those handmade items. But I do want to get into the cause, the root, because we're talking about where we are today. Could you get us back a little bit, just a little bit if you can? How did we get here with manufacturing our clothes and not having a manufacturing system set up here in the U.S. for clothes? Like, when did we start to see it being outsourced?
We started to see a shift around the 90s, and this was during the introduction of NATO, when manufacturing and trade borders opened up a lot, and people were able to, companies were able to relocate their manufacturing to other economically developing countries, and what we typically refer to as the global South, which would include China or Vietnam or India or any of the other countries that you see most of the labels that you're wearing. I think only about 6% or so of clothes are now produced in the United States. So a lot of our manufacturing abilities and also the technological evolution and advances that these countries now have had for, going on almost 3 decades have really made that imbalance even larger.
Oh, wow. So, we're going to get back to talking about fast fashion and the way that they are disposed and the sustainable practices. I do want to talk a little bit about garment workers and traditional manufacturing. I know one of the reasons that we have a fashion revolution global campaign is due to a terrible factory fire, I believe it was, in 2008, I believe it was. No.
2013.
Thank you. 2013. And there was a horrible manufacturing collapse of a factory. And I just remember hearing about that and thinking to myself, how do I change my habits now when I know that a lot of those factories are positioned in the way that they are in those spaces, like you said, the global South? So can we talk just a little bit about what we're seeing right now, especially in manufacturing outside of a country, and why we are coming together as a global initiative to stop this?
Well, the production that happens overseas is often not very transparent and not ethical. And unfortunately, the most people who are affected, it exploits women and children. And when you think about the industry and how it's promoted, largely to women, it puts that in the shadow. I think a lot of people, it's out of sight, out of mind. And with social media now, it's harder to ignore when you say, oh, it's just produced over there, or the clothes go over there. Where is there? Yeah. There's like piles of clothing that have been being discarded and dumped in the Chilean desert because in that area, there are no policy regulations for that kind of stuff. And where we start dumping our clothes to, like, Goodwill or these other stores, when they can't sell their clothes, they get bailed out and shipped overseas to places like Ghana and other places like that. So we're actually dumping all our waste on these countries that don't have the infrastructure to support the waste that's coming in so rapidly. I'm talking about truckloads by the minute. And then they don't know what to do with it, but then they don't have the policy to control it. So then they're putting it into these places, which you can actually see. There was a snapshot from space, and it looks like a lake, but it's actually closed. And then people went ahead and burned it. So now there's toxic fumes and chemicals. So actually that photo, if you see it, it's not accurate anymore because it's basically been burned up, but that's just putting all these other toxic things into the environment. So it's really just about having some education, self-education, and being a conscious consumer, because the news and the media, it's really hard to keep up with.
It really is. And I'm just thinking about just all the things that we see happening within our world from all different angles, all different sectors, all different factors that we're living through right now. And this is just one that's contributing to our environmental, I want to say collapse, but
malaise. It's a polycrisis.
Yes,
so
yes.
that's the term that people are using. It's not just the climate crisis. There are tons of things going on. So it's actually a polycrisis.
Oh, wow. Yes, thank you so much, Paulina, for bringing this to our attention. Now that we've outlined some of the issues we've been talking about, I do want to talk about how sustainable fashion addresses some of the issues that we're talking about, because we see that they are there and they're apparent. How do sustainable practices reduce water waste?
Well, for example, there are alternative methods to get materials and fibers. So, for example, instead of talking about cotton or organic cotton, which still honestly uses a lot of land use and water wastage, there's something called regenerative cotton, which takes the fibers from existing cotton garments and breaks them down at a molecular level, and then doesn't really have to use that water irrigation or things like leather, where it takes a cow years to be at the right size to be then used for skins for leather. You also have to feed them. You have the whole livestock. Instead, you can grow biomaterials in a lab, and actually that timeline is much quicker. So there's ways to reduce the impact just in the material alone. Even micromodal and modal, which is from beechwood trees, uses way less water, and it's highly regenerative. That was one of the first fabrics that I started using as a sustainable designer in 2010. And so using natural fibers is a really good place, because not only do they regenerate, but they also decompose. So if they do end up in landfill, for example, in contrast to plastics or other man-made synthetic materials, they're not just going to sit there for actually way longer than any of us are going to be here.
Yeah. Yes. And how do sustainable brands reduce textile waste as well? We're seeing a lot of that, like you talked about, the river of fabric out there. So how are we seeing the sustainable brands reducing textile waste? And as well, how do we see this adding to fairer wages and better practices for workers?
Well, the first part, I would say a lot of brands are starting to introduce circular programs where their customers can send back or buy back, and then are incentivized to get discounts on new products. For example, Allbirds is a shoe company. They've designed it. It's called Design for Disassembly, where 80% of a product's impact comes at the design stage. So when you're designing this product, you know that at the end that it's going to be returned. So you can disassemble and put those different pieces of the shoe or the garment back into the loop. So you're essentially what you call closing the loop. And then you can keep the materials in stream longer, and then they don't end up as waste, because waste becomes one of the biggest problems. And I've been trying to tell people that actually waste is the material and the resource that we now have the most of. And so we need to kind of treat it as such and value waste, and not think of it as, something just to be discarded on the cutting room floor.
Yeah, yes, I love the way to think about that. And in that way, like, we have an abundance of waste now, so much. We talk about it all the time in landfills, in our backyards, wherever it may be. And we have to find a way to use it more sustainably, more smarter.
It's called waste-led design, too. So a lot of designers that are sustainable, it's not maybe just from, the natural fiber part or slow fashion, but it's actually taking existing material or remnant fabric or discarded clothing and being able to recycle them, or even just use the scraps that come from the cutting room floor. Coachtopia is Coach's new brand, and all of their designs are actually waste-led design. They're using scraps that, Coach is a huge a huge company, so they have a lot of waste, and now they have their own means to use it
and close the loop. And I'm thinking of Pingree Detroit here in the city of Detroit, who does that exact work. They use the materials from the cutting room floor in the automotive design industry, and they're making really, really cool things out of that leather material and other materials as well. You're listening to The Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham, and we are talking about the social and environmental harm to the fashion industry. My guest is Paulina Petkowski. She is a professor at the College for Creative Studies, a designer, a stylist, and an advocate for sustainable fashion practices. And we do want to hear from you. How have your fashion habits changed, if they've changed at all? Give us a call, 313-577-1019, 313-577-1019. Now, before we do go to the phone lines, we're going to go to the phone lines really quickly, but I do want to ask you, how can you be sure that people are willing to pay more when they do go out and we get away from fast fashion and we're looking to buy better quality clothes?
Well, the good news is you don't have to. There's a common misconception about that. But
Yes.
For example, I love to shop on eBay. There's also other online platforms called ThreadUp or The RealReal. And the best part about these platforms is that you will get the high quality clothing, the designer brands, and they're not imitations or knockoffs that you're going to get at the Walmart, like the new Birkin, the Workin. I mean, this stuff is just ridiculous. But honestly, you can get great quality made clothes. Like today I'm wearing a vintage Levi's jacket that I got from eBay, and some old Wrangler jeans that I thrifted that are, still hanging in there. So you don't have to spend more to necessarily shop or be sustainable. But there are some really great options out there, and local boutiques like Eugenie, Detroit, or Coute d'Ete, who do carry sustainable brands and small designers, which are worth supporting.
Yes. We actually just had Angela on from Coute d'Ete, so excited about that. Thank you so much. But I do want to go to the phone lines. We have Amin from Sterling Heights. She runs a communications firm. Amin, what's on your mind?
Hi, nice to be here. I just wanted to point out, yesterday was Earth Day, and I think there is a component to really raising the awareness on where we are sourcing our materials. So that the point that you made on the fibers and the cotton, but also just what is polyester made of, and what does that do to your skin, and how does that make you feel? And I think just in terms of changing consumption patterns, there is definitely a wave of fashion industry in Detroit looking to thrift, and stylists that are actually focused on that and doing a really great job. And I think just to the point that we can start looking at how do we reuse and recycle and repair versus just out with the old and in with the new. Thank you.
Thank you, Amin, for the call this morning from Sterling Heights. And I do want to bring you in, Paulina, and let you respond. Polyester and some of those other materials that we're wearing on our bodies every single day. I'm thinking about the fact that I am so nervous to wear my workout clothes and hit the gym again because I know the materials aren't the best for you.
There are a lot of growing concerns with this, similarly to how people want to eat organic food. When you're thinking about putting synthetic fibers and fabrics on your body, the athletic wear is definitely one of those concerns. But there are a growing amount of brands that are addressing that problem, and I'm really excited about that because they're using rubber instead of spandex, and then also cotton rubber as alternatives. And the other thing about what she mentioned with not just polyester, but fabrics that are blended, so a cotton poly or something like a spandex poly, those create what are typically called microfibers, which end up in our water when you wash them, and then end up in rivers, and then end up in fish, and then end up back in consumption. And actually, there's been plastic fragments that are being found in people's brains and in our bloodstreams, and they're so tiny that we don't even know how to get them out yet. We basically can't go back. But there is a new development that microfibers are now being referred to as fiber fragments, just a nuance in the terminology because they just mean a little bit of a different things, because sometimes fibers can be very small, so you don't want to confuse the microfiber with a fiber fragment, and those can come from all sorts of different textiles.
Man, I mean, so much food for thought right now, especially once again, talking about the environment. Once again, it's Earth Day yesterday, and just talking about making the fashion industry a little bit more sustainable. I just think about the ways that the fashion industry has impacted our environment, and we didn't know. We still have so much to learn about it. So I do want to introduce and talk to you about manufacturing, the scene here in Detroit. And I want to talk about how technology has helped kind of create a little boom here in the city of Detroit. So what does it look like right now in Detroit?
Well, the global fashion industry is a $1.84 trillion industry. So if we can even take a fraction of that into the city of Detroit, I would love to really see the impact of the job creation and the diversification of industries here. And going back just for a little history, Detroit was built on the fur industry. So this is part of our heritage. This is part of our culture. I mean, obviously, we know people love furs in Detroit, but the fur industry funded the auto industry. The people who actually boomed from that boomed into the automotive industry. So I kind of foresee the automotive industry, or whatever else we're transitioning in now into mobility, to maybe go back and start to invest in the fashion industry here, because there are some things coming up, but I think that's going to take some policy and local economic development initiatives to really support the economy and the infrastructure that's needed. Because even if there are people like Isaac or Pingree, doing manufacturing in Detroit, I think we need more of an industry council and the economic development support to really make the industry viable and strong here.
About the city of Detroit and the manufacturing, do we have the people? Do you think we have the people to support this industry or bringing an industry here like that to the city of Detroit?
I think it's a couple-fold. We do have people power here, and we do have a history of people who, are factory workers or, blue-collar labor, excuse me. Our population has decreased, though, since that time. So, yes, we have people here, but yes, we can also attract talent and bring people into the city who can help to educate and bring more of that into the city, because the fashion industry, it's not just designers and it's not just manufacturers. There are so many different layers of jobs that this could really produce and create for young people and for people that are more established and have those skills that we might need to bring in from, Italy for tailoring, or India for natural dyeing, or, Japan for bringing back salvage denim. There's so many other places in the world that we can lean on to partner with and bring back into the city, because Detroit is a unique city. It's diverse, and it's also, majority Black city. So I think we could be really unique in the American landscape to bring more fashion manufacturing here.
Yes. And I'm thinking, once again, we talked just a little bit earlier, or not earlier, but a few days ago, we talked about New York, and we're starting to see a decline in some of those places in the United States that were considered fashion capitals. Do you expect some sort of shift away from New York soon, or from those places that we historically have known as fashion capitals? And once again, where does Detroit position itself, and how do we position ourselves to be ready to take the reins if it does happen?
Yeah, I do think that New York, the garment district specifically, has really had a decline over the years. And the garment district was why it was such a strong, vibrant hub. I attended the Fashion Institute of Technology right in Chelsea. I had access to go to all of the trim stores, the fabric stores, Mood. I'd go to the pleating facilities, sewing rooms, and all of those places have been displaced because that rent's gotten so expensive, and a lot of the manufacturing has transferred to various different boroughs, which, logistically, practically speaking, is not very conducive. But on the other hand, Detroit has so much space. We do have these old factories and warehouses here. We are right on waterways, which is much more sustainable in terms of shipping over air freight. So we're connected to waterways. We are also in proximity to, New York, but we're also centrally located in the Midwest, where we can reclaim, what what other cities have done, like New York. And I think it's just also fostering the design talent and making sure that the designers here are educated in what the future of fashion looks like so that we are forward thinking. And I think Detroit does have the potential to be the next domestic sustainable fashion manufacturing hub. But we really need to put our necks out there and make that happen, because other cities like Philadelphia or LA, I think they're interested in that too, and I don't see why we should not push to make that here in Detroit.
And we're getting down to the end of our conversation here, but I do want to talk about why we're here talking in the first place. There is a revolution happening in Detroit's fashion industry this week. It began yesterday, I believe.
Fashion Revolution Week kicked off on Earth Day yesterday.
Yeah, so give us the rundown. What's happening this week, and why is it so important that it's happening in Detroit this year?
Well, Fashion Revolution is a global nonprofit that was started after the Rana Plaza collapse in the UK, and now it's spread to over 80 countries. And so this week is Fashion Revolution Week, and there's a whole entire diverse lineup of activations and workshops and tours and panel discussions, art exhibitions, clothing swaps, mending in public days. The list of events that have been voluntarily organized by an amazing group of Detroiters, a lot of women at the forefront of this. Shout out to the core team. You guys, it's been an incredible journey to start planning to participate in this global campaign just right here in the city of Detroit. And there's an Instagram that was started called Detroit Fashion United, and all of the schedule and event listings are there. They're also on bereworn.com, which is a local startup that's focusing on sustainable events in the city, so you can find what's happening and going on. There's a panel discussion this evening at D Artillery in Hamtramck that I will also be on with a bunch of other people who are participating. And the activities go through Sunday. There's also the revamp clothing swap, where you can get bags and bags of clothes for $25, and you can bring all of your clothes that you no longer want to that, and they will responsibly make sure that those go to people in need locally. So there's just a lot going on.
And I just did a clothing clean, so I'm going to do another one, and I'm going to make sure to bring my clothes this weekend because I literally have to do it again. Paulina Petkolski is a professor at the College for Creative Studies, a designer, a stylist, and an advocate for sustainable fashion practices. Paulina, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro today.
Thank you.
Coming up, we'll talk to an organization that's developing the next generation of fashion manufacturers here in Detroit. And we still want to hear from you. How have your fashion buying habits changed over time? Or have they changed at all? The number is 313-577-1019, 313-577-1019. We will be right back on the Metro. Stay right there. Welcome back to the Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Tia Graham. And sustainable fashion means creating clothes out of quality materials. It means paying fabric workers fair wages and providing them safe working conditions. It also means that once fairly paid workers create quality clothing and that you, the consumer, buy it from a company in your area. If Detroit is going to grow its sustainable fashion industry, it needs more designers making clothes right here. We want to turn to an organization that is working to do that here in the city. The Industrial Sewing and Innovation Center, or ISAC, trains those interested in manufacturing. Jen Garino is the president and CEO of ISAC. She joins me in studio. She joins me on the phone now to talk a little bit more. Jen, welcome to the Metro.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Of course. So just for those out there listening, what's is Isaac's origin story. Where did the idea originate, and how did it come to be?
Well, it came to be when a group of industry stakeholders realized that there were such big issues in our industry that weren't getting addressed, and we really felt like there needed to be a national institute that could focus on solutions day in and day out, and those solutions would be around innovation and skilling and workplace culture. And so once we really understood that we wanted to lead that charge to make that happen, we went about raising the funds to have our institute headquartered in Detroit.
Beautiful. And why Detroit?
Well, there's a number of reasons. One is we aren't in LA, we aren't in New York, so we don't have to deconstruct something that's not working before we get started. We can kind of build it as it could and should be. And then we are obviously a state that is known for innovation and engineering, both of which the industry needs desperately in order to transform itself.
Yeah, so Detroit is not known for manufacturing clothes, although fashion is a popular trend, and it's not a dominant industry as well. So why did it seem like there would be an opportunity in the city to build out and to start from the ground up and to make it your own way?
Well, what we have seen, what we believed and what we have seen is that, Detroiters and the Black community would love to have another career option. And what we've seen in our classes and in hiring and in our ongoing workshops is Detroiters love that this now is an opportunity that is in Detroit that they would have had to leave Detroit before. And so what we're seeing is sort of this pent-up interest in fashion and manufacturing now have a place to live.
Yeah, and we've been discussing how sustainability is the answer to the current fashion industry's harms. How does a training program like yours fit into the whole situation? How do you emphasize the practice through your trainings?
Well, one of the ways that you create sustainability is you reduce overproduction. Right now, globally, we overproduce 50 billion garments a year, which go into landfill unsold every year. And so the way you fix that is you create onshore capabilities. In other words, instead of overbuying, speculatively buy, you buy some offshore, but the rest you buy closer to demand when you know what you're going to sell. In order to do that, you have to have talent and you need to have innovative advanced manufacturing capabilities. So when you put skilling and those together, now you have an industrial base that can lead the world in responsive advanced manufacturing for apparel. So now you're making things when you need them, so the right thing at the right time. So we believe that Detroit can lead that new model with the talent that we have here.
And speaking of talent is the perfect segue because speaking with Paulina as well, I asked her the question, do we have the people, do we have the talent here to support a fashion manufacturing industry here and one that could boom in the future? What do you say to that, and how does your organization help add more designers and manufacturers to the industry?
So we absolutely believe we have the people. Now, to be clear, we do not teach design because we have great institutes that do that. Mm-hmm. So College for Creative Studies, where Paulina is, teaches design. So we're not duplicating that delivery of a career path. But what we do is we teach people then how to take design and how do you manufacture it? How do you, instead of shipping it overseas or having to take it to another state, be able to manufacture it here? So what we do is we believe in investing in teaching operators how to sew, but not stopping there. So teaching them additional skills so they can have a mixed set of skills that are higher wage, higher skill, and are more high tech, frankly. And so we're seeing that being really attracting a new generation of talent that the industry has had a hard time doing in the past.
I want to stick with that just a little bit before we move into Isaac Honors, which is happening really, really soon, tomorrow actually. But I do want to talk to you about the different career paths that you're talking about because the fashion industry impacts our lives in so many different factors and sectors we often don't notice. So can we talk about just the path that you're trying to open up with Isaac, you and your co-workers at Isaac, but could you talk just about that pathway and the importance of creating new lanes for folks to work in?
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, we really believe that starting with fundamentals of industrial and sewing production is the way to go first, because we don't teach just sewing. We teach sort of the basic principles of putting together apparel, being able to use the right vocabulary, being able to understand what the industry standards are so that you understand how to speak in a manufacturing environment for apparel. From there, there's a lot of different paths. You can be a sewing operator. You can begin to start your own business because now you've been equipped with how you speak to a factory to make your goods. And then once you're in the manufacturing environment, there's all sorts of jobs. I mean, yes, you can be an operator on the floor, but there's also technical design, there's quality, there's supervision, there's supply chain. There are so many jobs within our industry that are beyond the factory floor, but that are connected to the factory floor. And at Isaac, we teach how those things are connected to one another.
And before I do let you go, I do want to talk about Isaac Honors, which is an award you give to companies that are doing some of this sustainable and forward-looking work that we've been talking about all hour. You'll be honoring this year's awardees tomorrow. What are these companies or designers doing that brought their work to your attention in the first place?
Well, we really believe that, if you're going to transform an industry, you have to recognize the pioneers that are making change and recognize next-gen talent. So right now there are no awards that we're aware of that really highlight this work that's being done on behalf of sustainable manufacturing. So we have a Manufacturer of the Year, Innovator of the Year, Champion of the Year, and then Alumni of the Year. So we believe in order to really encourage change and encourage transformation, you have to lift up these pioneers and lift up these champions in a public setting so that we can inspire people to continue this work.
Jen Guarino is the president and CEO of the Industrial Sewing and Innovation Center. Before I let you go, Jen, can you just let us know what time Isaac Honors is tomorrow?
Yes, it is 5 to 8 at the Madison, downtown Detroit.
Thank you so much, Jen, for joining us on the Metro today.
Thank you. Thanks for the time.
From the WDET newsroom, the Vatican has opened St. Peter's Basilica for people to pay their final respects to Pope Francis, whose body will lie in state until Saturday's funeral and burial. And in sports, the Tigers did lose to the San Diego Padres 2-0 at Comerica Park. Starting pitcher Jack Flaherty gave up the game's only 2 runs at the top of the second inning, and Flaherty struck out 9 batters in 6 innings. The teams wrap up their 3-game series this afternoon. Coming up, overdose deaths and cases have dropped significantly in Dearborn. In about 7 minutes, we'll talk with the city's public health director about why. You all stay right there on the Metro. This is WDET FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation.